Hi everyone, I hope you guys are doing well. In this session, basically, we're looking into a philosophical passage. Little difficult because the passage I think has a lot of jargonish words. So, just for that reason, I'm saying that this is a bit difficult. Otherwise, there is nothing as difficult in these passages. It is actually taken from one of the past cat mocks. So, the number of questions are less, but you'll enjoy the session. The word count for this particular passage is 385, so it is in the मतलब जितना cat test कर रहा है उसी range में है. So let's start with the analysis. All right, so the first passage, the para says knowledge originates either in scientific objective observation of real world or in emotional highly personal apprehension of values expressed as I like or approve of this. Rhetoric is not possible within this duality. We can, however, question this duality, and this involves some broader border crossing from the territory of philosophy into the world of rhetoric. The turns to study the particular sites where writing takes place to explore how writing and persuasion works. Okay, so it is only because the origination of knowledge is through scientific and objective observation of the world and emotional. So I can at in one go I can say scientific objective observation and emotional personal apprehension, and rhetoric does not fit into that bill. So if I have to understand how I can question the duality and involve, I have to get into that world of rhetoric that turns out to study particular sites. From this perspective, the structure of scientific report is not just a matter of superficial style, but rather a complex stock of argumentative moves or commonplaces that serves to reinforce and reproduce a view of the world that characterizes the discipline of science. In short, the common topics have become in their way as specialized as special topics, or specialized knowledge that characterizes as particular discipline. Now if you realize this entire para has nothing in general that is very difficult, except the fact that it has sprinklages of words like your apprehension, rhetoric. If you don't know the meaning of rhetoric, you're in a bit of a problem, but at least contextual meaning you should know. Now let's look into the next para. Knowledge is also discovered through dialectic. What is a dialectic? Knowledge is not created through isolated self interacting with the physical world, nor even by groups of selves attempting to achieve Platonic certainty through discursive testing of logical propositions or mathematical axioms. Rather, knowledge is developed commonly through process of making. Now if you realize, this entire thing of dialectic nonsense with whatever they have written is just to say that knowledge can be discovered through dialectic also. That is sort of a, you can say, vaad vivad kind of a thing in Hindi. I'm sorry, I am using Hindi, but then you can understand it like that also. Knowledge is not created through isolated self interacting with the physical world. Okay, rather knowledge is developed communally through process of making an intelligible world with my fellow human beings. Wow. Hence we have the idea of ongoing conversation with persuasion, a necessary means of keeping the conversation as a form of social interaction going. Now what exactly this line said, I am not getting any idea. Okay, so why do I lie? And let's just read ahead. Maybe the next line will give me some context. But how do we influence each other through language? In why does rhetoric need a theory of reading? Dog Brent says. Okay, typically so far we were only looking at knowledge and how knowledge can be discovered through dialectic and scientific observation, personal this thing. Now they are also saying that the influence of language, or rather how do we influence through language. Okay, rhetoric is an art of persuasion only, but right now we are interested in knowing how that influence takes place through language. Let's read what this dog Brent has to say. Traditional rhetoric simply had to have faith that an audience could interpret accurately. Rhetoric is traditionally defined as the art of using language to influence others. Wow. So anybody who had a problem of understanding what rhetoric is, they are giving you the meaning also in the last line. It is a traditionally defined art of using language to influence others. Behavior and belief. This implies that discourse is reasonably reliable means by which one person can affect another. Discourse basically having again a vad vivad. The rhetor must know that what he puts into the discourse will be roughly reflected in what the audience takes out. I will read this again. The rhetor must know that what he puts into his discourse will be roughly reflected in what the audience takes out. So whatever the rhetor puts into his discourse will be roughly reflected in what the audience takes out. Otherwise persuasion is meaningless, what I am saying, and if you are getting something else out of it, then the persuasion goes out of the picture. For the rhetor, now this is an interesting line, for the rhetor has no predictable influence on his audience. Wow. The rhetor has no predictable influence on his audience. To do his job, rhetor must believe human beings not act at random, but rather for reason that he can predict and use. This assumption, however, has been treated simply as an assumption, an article of faith. All right. So let's look into the questions. I don't think let's waste our time trying to decipher anything else. If there is anything that needs to be deciphered, I'll get back to it. Alright, so first question says a suitable title for the passage. Let's look into the first option. Ways through which knowledge is discovered. Actually, they have started the passage with the idea of knowledge, but the passage is not about discovery of knowledge or anything, any ways through which knowledge is discovered. They have said that knowledge can be discovered through this and this and that, but then typically it is something else to do with the art of influence, rhetoric, and this and that. So not definitely this one. Knowledge can be discovered only through rhetoric. This is one of the things which they have actually said is not true. Okay, so knowledge can be discovered through some of the ideas like, again, scientific objective and personal anecdotes. Rhetoric has a very less impact on this thing, so this also goes away. And also we are looking for a suitable title, so knowledge can be discovered only through rhetoric is a very, you can say, extreme thought process. The third one says rhetoric and the discovery of knowledge. Now this is something which is sounding good, and it actually clicks with the passage, so I can keep it. So I'll keep it for the time being. Traditional rhetoric and its assumption. This is not just about traditional rhetoric or anything related to the assumptions of that goes out. Philosophy and rhetoric. Nowhere in the passage we are discussing any sort of philosophy with rhetoric. This also goes away, which only means that 3 has to be my answer. The tone of the passage is predominantly, this is the question number 2. Now you have to tell me, if you have to pause the video, please pause the video, but please tell me, is it descriptive? Okay, so the passage starts off by some idea of knowledge, okay, and then it jumped to rhetoric. So they have not started describing knowledge, they have not started describing rhetoric. So no, none of that ideas have been put into this, none of those ideas have been put into this place. So descriptive, definitely this passage is not a descriptive one, so goes out. Argumentative. Now argumentative, first of all, understand what an argument is. I have said this enough and more number of times. Argument is not some sort of samvad, vad vivad that is happening. Argument basically has a premise that premise follows a few assumptions, and that assumptions will, with that premise, will lead to some sort of a conclusion. Now this is an argument. Now if it were an argumentative passage, there were many premises and many conclusions. This was an open-ended passage, so I cannot say for the same reason that this passage is argumentative goes out. Can you tell me whether or not this was analytical? If you actually picked analytical, this is wrong. This analytical is something which has a lot of analysis. So if I am talking about knowledge, I'll get into the depths of knowledge and I'll analyze a few things about knowledge. They are just giving anecdotes, they're just giving ideas. One author talking about the ideas of some other author, and then maybe adding some bits to it. So in a way or the other it can be subjective, but let me hold my horses at this point and look at the last option, skeptical. Is it skeptical? Think about it. Skeptical is something in which the passage will not agree to something, or would highly unlikely choose an opinion. This passage is not skeptical also. It is a subjective, the tone is definitely subjective. It is a subjective note of an author who talks about some ideas, takes the help of some other author like this Dog Brent, and then adds on it. The last one, which one of the following can be inferred from the passage? Now this is an interesting one. I think you guys should stop the video at this point and try and answer this one. All right, let's start off with the first one. The duality as regards the origin of knowledge takes into account communal interaction. First of all, understand that if there is only one statement that can be inferred, that means there will be 4 statements which you cannot infer. So your task typically is not to find out what you can infer. Your task is to find out what you cannot infer. The duality as regards the origin of knowledge takes into account the communal. Is this communal interaction has anything to do with duality? This communal interaction is given in the last part of the passage, which if I take you there, just a second, this is in that persuasion business, that communal interaction is there. This is where it is. Knowledge is, okay, just a second, one second. Yeah, sorry for that. So here it is. Knowledge is discovered through dialectic, and knowledge is developed communally through a process of making an intelligible world with my fellow human beings. Process of making an intelligible world with my fellow human beings, rather it is developed communally. So it has to do something with this knowledge and not the other way around. So the question which said that duality and anything that has knowledge, I would be apprehensive of this, so I'll eliminate it at this point. The effectiveness of rhetoric as a means to discover knowledge is a suspect. Well, yes, the effectiveness of rhetoric as a means to discover knowledge is suspect. It is true, so it can be inferred in a way, so I'll keep it. Persuasion is one of the factors which impedes the discovery of knowledge through rhetoric. Okay, persuasion is a factor that impedes, or you can say harm, the discovery of knowledge through rhetoric. Is definitely nothing of that sort is given out in the passage, goes out. The reader can influence his audience even if the audience is not interested in what he is saying. No, it is given in the passage. If you go there, for the reader has no predictable influence on his audience. So if you look at this thing, that the reader can influence his audience even if the audience is not interested, is not the case, because the reader has no predictable influence on the audience. So it's not like that. Goes out, goes out. One also goes out. Rhetorical philosophy seeks to increase universal brotherhood and universal. Rhetorical philosophy goes out. So the effectiveness of rhetoric as a means to discover knowledge is a suspect, has to be the answer, because yes, it is there also given in the passage, right? That first we talked about this knowledge, and then discovery of knowledge, then rhetoric comes into the picture, and rhetoric, mind you, does not fit into the duality. So rhetoric does not fit into the duality. Probably that is one of the reason why the effectiveness of rhetoric as a means to discover knowledge is a suspect. Obviously, I think we should check the answers as well. Let's look into the 51, 52, 53. Okay, so we chose this one, right? Third one, fourth one, and the second one. Let's see. 52, 50, 50, 51, 2, 3. 51 is 3, 4, 2. Let's see. 3, 4, and 2. Correct. So that's it. Thank you.